In the season finale, we get a little more backstory into Joe's mommy issues. When Joe was sent to the home, he was able to find his file and locate where his mother was living. So he tracked her down, only to find out that she had completely restarted with a new son, a little boy named Jacob. Joe confronts her, asking, "Why did you just leave me?" And the best answer his mom gives him is, "Some people just need a new start." Modern day Joe has rushed home and is frantically scrubbing all the blood off of his hands, hiding the bloody shirt, and thinking about how he's going to get Henry out of there. But simultaneously, he gets a text from Marienne saying, "Something happened to Ryan, call me," and then Love walks through the door. Love comes upstairs and just starts rambling about plans and whatnot, but Joe can sense that something's wrong, and then he looks on her jacket cuff and notices a smear of blood, and he asks about it. And Love has to come clean that it's Theo's. She tells Joe that he's still there, and Joe says, "I'll clean him up, don't give it another thought." And that's when Love completely changes the conversation and says, "I think it's time we start a new chapter. I think it's time we start trying to have another baby." At this point, Joe is just trying to tell her anything she wants to hear, figuring that he'll be gone with Henry soon, so he says, "Yeah, I think that's a great idea." And then he heads off to deal with her mess. As Joe is cleaning up the Theo mess, he actually hears a gunshot go off. And that's because Sherry and Carrie are fighting. Sherry ended up shooting the gun, and it ended up hitting Carrie's leg. Joe, however, isn't going to interfere with that, and he really doesn't have time to because Marienne calls him. She tells him that somebody killed Ryan. They suspect it was a mugging. She's only calling because she's concerned that the police might look at her, even though she has an alibi. Joe tries to make her feel better by saying, "The man that hurt you is gone. Your life is now going to get easier." And Marienne does admit, "I'm not sad that he's gone." Joe then tells Marienne, "Well, something else happened last night. Me and Love are officially separating." Joe then tells Marienne, "Get out of town while all this Ryan stuff's going on. Think of somewhere you want to go and just go." And Marienne asks Joe to come with them, and that's because she admits to Joe that she loves him too. And Joe excitedly says, "Yeah, count us in. I mean, we'd be crazy not to try after everything we've been through. We just got to tie up a few loose ends, and then we'll go." Marienne hints at the possibility of going to Paris, and then they hang up. Joe is pumped, he's excited, but he's got an issue because Theo actually isn't dead. He opens up the tarp, and there's Theo, pretty banged up. He sees Joe's face, and he immediately starts apologizing to him. Through conversation, Joe figures out that there was an affair going on between Theo and Love. But even after all that, Joe isn't about to kill Theo. He puts him in his car and drugs him up with Carrie's supply, and then drops him off at a hospital loading dock. He then heads to Dante's house and tries to pick up Henry, only to find out that Love has already picked up Henry. And that's when Joe knows that he has an issue. And he does. Love ended up finding the bloody shirt. And as soon as she sees it, she knows that he was having an affair. It's all she could think about when she went to a fresh start. She had to act, though, like everything was normal. So when Kiki comes up and asks her to make some cupcakes for her, she agreed. But she has to tell somebody about this affair. So she goes downstairs and tells her best friend, Sherry Conrad. And Sherry's advice is to kill Joe because he was abusive. Sherry tells her, "I'll back you up. After that, you can let me out." Carrie from the corner says, "You can let us out." And Sherry hears him but ignores it. She just starts shitting all over husbands, saying how they force wives into situations. And after this whole anti-husband rant, Love just looks at her and says, "You're a monster. I always knew your marriage was a sham, but looks like the only murderer in this room is you." And then she walks out so Sherry can have an awkward conversation with Carrie. Love then heads home and makes dinner, waiting for Joe to show up. And he does, but Joe has to play it cool and act like everything's okay. He sits down to eat, and he's kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop, and that's when Love brings up the fact that she saw on Twitter a local TV guy was murdered. And she recognized the name, and she looked into it, and it was the ex-husband of Marienne, his boss. Love asks him straight up, "Do you love her?" And Joe doesn't say a word. Love tells him, "I know you cheated on me and you lied." But Joe says, "Well, you cheated on me with Theo. Do you really want to play this game?" That's when Joe brings up the idea of divorce, going their separate ways, amicably, raising Henry, co-parenting, doing this like civilized adults. Joe tells her, "We don't have to do anything impulsive." She says, "What's that supposed to mean?" And Joe says, "Well, what happened with James when he tried to leave? Your mother told me." Love is having a tough time processing the D word, but before she can even give Joe an answer, Henry starts acting up, so she has to go tend to him. Joe's concerned that she might come back with Henry or a knife, so he arms himself with a meat cleaver. But when Love returns, she doesn't have either. She does, however, set the record straight on what happened with James. Just like now, she was taken completely off guard when James asked for a separation. She couldn't believe that he was with her when he was sick, but then he gets better and he wanted to be away from her. So she drugged him. James's death was an accidental drugging. She just didn't get the doses right. She wanted to numb him so she could sit him down to talk to him and convince him that they were meant to be together. But things went awry and James ended up dead. The good news is for Jo, she's learned from her previous mistakes. She's gotten the doses right. And that's when Jo starts feeling really funny and he realizes, oh shit, I've been drugged. As Jo lies there paralyzed on the floor, Love tells him, no one will ever love you like I love you. But before she can try to convince Jo that they're meant to be together, she has to go drop those cupcakes off to Kiki. But she grabs Jo's phone and texts Marienne, come to my house ASAP, it's an emergency. She ties up Jo, says, I'll be back in 10 minutes, and when I come back, I'm going to save our marriage. So Love heads off, but next door, Matthew sees her leave. And he's still pretty convinced that Love Quinn had something to do with it. But what he's really concerned with at the moment is the fact that he hasn't heard from Theo. So with him already suspicious that Love might have killed Natalie, he's now concerned that maybe Theo is in their house. So he sneaks in. And that's when he finds Jo lying there, paralyzed. Matthew starts asking Jo, where is Theo? But Jo can't answer because he's so drugged up. He's trying to signal to Matthew to look at his phone, and finally Matthew picks up on this and sees the Waze history, which had directions to a hospital. Now that Matthew has that information, you'd think maybe he would save Jo, but no. He thinks that the couple had something to do with Natalie's death, so he ties Jo back up, leaving him the way he found him, and says, enjoy whatever Love does to you. And then he heads off to get Theo. Love ends up returning a few minutes later. She then waits for Marienne to show up, and Marienne shows up a few minutes later. She's very surprised when Love answers the door, but Love says, why don't you come inside, because I'm the one who texted you. Marienne awkwardly comes in the door, but she doesn't see Jo. Jo, however, can see the entire conversation. Love confronts Marienne about the affair, and Marienne tells her, he said you guys were separated. Marienne starts apologizing for possibly breaking up this marriage. Love then tells Marienne about how Jo was the one who killed Ryan, and Marienne is complete disbelief, but Love tells her when Joe's obsessed with somebody, he'll do anything for them. I would know, he did it for me. And it looks like Love is about to kill Marienne when all of a sudden Juliet shows up because she's got to go to the bathroom, and that changes the entire mood in the room. And with Juliet in the bathroom, Love tells her, you and your daughter need to run, just completely disappear. Ryan is just the beginning of what he's willing to do. The whole time, Jo is hoping that Marienne comes to his defense, but she doesn't. Marienne actually tells Love that she should run, although Love says it's not that simple. But Marienne warns her that if she doesn't, she could end up losing her son. She needs to think about him, not about anybody else, just Henry. Marienne ends up leaving, completely intact, very much alive. And Love walks over to Jo and says, well, I do see why you like her. I mean, I can't believe I almost took that little girl's mother away. Love starts rambling, justifying her actions, and then saying, I realized my husband's the problem. She gets down to kill Jo, but that's when Jo stabs her with a needle, injecting her. Whatever Love gave him has worn off, and that's because Jo started to wonder what exactly Love was growing in the garden, so he looked into it and found out it was a flower that could be turned into a paralytic. He looked into some antidotes, and when Love went to go check on Henry earlier, he took one. It wasn't enough to completely stop the paralytic, but it was enough to bring him out of it quicker. And while Love gave him just the right amount, Jo found out where she was hiding the doses, chocked a syringe full of it, and injected her so much that it would stop her forever. Love's last dying words are, we are perfect for each other, but we're bad for Henry, and he will know what you did. And then she keels over and dies. Jo now needs to start thinking about Henry, what exactly he's going to do with him. He knows that there's a pretty good chance Love will go down for this, but he was married to her, and he can't risk having Henry grow up in the system like he did. So he ends up taking Henry over to Dante's place, writing a letter explaining the whole situation, knocking on the door, and saying goodbye to his son one last time. He heads back to the house to try to set the scene, dragging Love's body into the kitchen, putting a syringe in her hand, and writing a suicide note. He even goes so far as to chop 2 of his toes off. Then he puts the oven on full blast, and the house goes up in flames. Jo disappears, but the house fire was put out in just enough time to salvage a lot of the evidence. The suicide note was found. The 2 toes were found, but the rest of Joe Goldberg wasn't, so it looks like Love chopped him up. The story of Love Quinn goes national. It's even bigger than Guinevere Beck. Shortly after, Madre Linda begins to heal. Matthew picks up Theo from the hospital, and their relationship seems good. Henry is still with Dante. The Quinns put up a fight to get baby Henry, but Love had already put it in writing that Dottie was never to see him again. So it took a little bit in the court system, but Henry ended up right where his, quote, dying father wanted him to be, in a loving home. The bakery was taken over by Andrew and Jackson. They rebranded it, but it became a pretty popular spot. And then there's Sherry and Carrie. Carrie was on death's door when Sherry realized these two don't even trust each other. There's got to be a key in here somewhere. And she started turning over every single container until finally she found one. Of course, they were able to parlay this into success. Writing a blog post, making them out to be the heroes, and even writing a book, which was very successful. It even led to them doing TED Talks. But then finally, there's Joe. Joe disappeared forever, but he's still looking for Marienne. And there's only one place that she hinted at going, and that was Paris. So somehow, he was able to get on a flight to Paris with no passport, a doctored passport. I don't know, those details are pretty murky, but Joe Goldberg is in Paris, and he's looking for Marienne. And that is the end of Season 3 of You. Thank you so much for getting this part of the recap. I really appreciate it. Please consider subscribing to the channel. Hit thumbs up if you thought this was good. Smash that thumbs down button if you thought it sucked. Be nice in the comment section. Nasty comments make me feel bad. I do have merch. Go buy a shirt or something. That'd be cool. And if you know somebody who's looking for a recap of You Season 3, please consider sharing this to your social media platforms or blogs. I'm talking to you, Sherry. And let me know if you like this season. But once again, thank you so much for supporting the channel.